welcome.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
I'm thrilled to be back.
This is really exciting. I personally have known you for a while through the Jackie Robinson organization, as a matter of fact. And 2 years ago, we were just talking, 2 years ago in family session, Laura and I were in the same session, and we were talking about what we were going to do in our future. And I just come off a national campaign, and I said, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to go back into finance. I think I might just drop everything and go run a congressional in Ohio. And then got to Lauren, and she's like, y'all, I think I just might run for Congress. and here we are 2 years later as on stage. And so my first question to you is just about that through line from the Jackie Robinson organization to the Obama administration to where you are now, because any one of these people could be future members of Congress, senators, presidents. So what was that like for you, and what kind of like, how did Jackie Robinson help get you there?
Thank you. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to Damien and to Della for having me here today, and thanks to Sosa for your time. So the pathway for me to get from the University of Michigan to the Obama administration to the United States Congress really began with the Jackie Robinson Foundation, truthfully. So my freshman year, you know how we have those regional gatherings during the holiday season, regional gatherings during the summer. I went to the Christmas holiday gathering, and a student the year ahead of me came back and was talking about an internship that she had through the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And it was a paid internship in DC, and she was talking about the great time she had that summer, and I was like, sign me up for that. And so I didn't have a lot of plans for my summer, and so I applied and ended up getting this placement with Senator Obama's office. Now, I had no clue that was going to change my life in the way that it did. But this was the last summer that the Republicans were in charge of the Congress before Nancy Pelosi became Speaker for the first time. And so they had things like Flag Burning Week, Stem Cell Week, Partial Birth Abortion Ban Week, and they would like stir up their base, and those people would come to DC and meet with us all week. But I saw politics and how the political process could be used to move people in a direction. Now, ultimately, they were unsuccessful, right? They lost the House, but I learned a lot. I certainly admired Senator Obama's leadership and stayed in the Obama family for the years to come. And so when I finished school, went to graduate school, and then got my dream job, working to implement the Affordable Care Act and provide health care to 23 million Americans. They gave me an office and let me do this every day, and I was like, yes, I made it. And just tried to do my very best at that point in time in that role. But knew ultimately that our healthcare was going to be under threat, right? From the very moment that the Affordable Care Act was passed, the Republicans and some adversaries have been trying to like chip away at that legacy, chip away at the program, and really try to take away people's healthcare. And I knew that I was going to have to continue the journey to protect that coverage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you decided to run for office in a district that was 90% white. And so often we see Black candidates pushed to run in Black districts,
yeah, of course,
pushed to represent Black folks by like our own just Democratic establishment often. So can you kind of talk about the obstacles that you faced running in that district, and why it's so important for folks to for folks of color to step in and try to kind of push past some of those barriers?
Sure. So I ran in the community that I grew up in. This is a suburban community. It's a town called Naperville, and that's my home. So the idea that somehow I would not be a good fit to run for office in my home is not something that I ever considered. because it's my community and it's our community, right? I am not some outsider in my home. And so that in and of itself defied conventional wisdom. You see, in the Congress, we had not had a black member of Congress representing a majority white district outside of our United States senators. In the House, we had not seen that. And so I was really attempting something that there was not really a strong playbook for. But I believed in my soul that, I was the best person for the job and knew that I had something unique and special to offer. So the challenges were tremendous. My district had never elected a young person, had never elected a woman, had never elected a person of color. And yet my district had elected someone that rose to become the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Okay, so we're talking about entrenched Republican power. Entrenched. And that is who we were really running against. It was not the congressman himself. And so that's a barrier, right? There were Democrats in my community that had not been trained at all, didn't know how to do the fundamentals of a campaign, didn't know how to door knock, didn't know how to have a persuasive conversation. We had to cultivate a donor base. Usually when you run for office, if you ran for office in New York City, you would say, okay, I want to run. And probably the next day, there'd be 20 people in your building with some clipboards and some sneakers laced up, ready to go. Somebody would walk in and hand you a list and say, call these 30 people and they will give you some money. And you would probably be able to do an interview and it would be on the evening news, right? That's how it works in areas where there's a strong framework and foundation. My community was not like that. We had to build it all and fight at every stage to get the resources and the help that we needed. And yet we did it. We did it. And now in the United States Congress, I am not the only one that represents a majority white district. There are 5 of us, 5 African Americans that represent these kinds of districts. Colin Allred out of Texas, Jonah Goose out of Colorado, Antonio Delgado, upstate New York, Lucy McBath, you all know Lucy in Georgia, and me, and Johanna Hayes from Connecticut. And so, there's this tremendous shift, even within the Black caucus, to say, our viability, our electability as people, as Black people, as people of color, is much broader than that conventional wisdom would ever lead us to believe. So my lesson to you, or my advice to you, is if you see a problem and you believe in your soul that it needs to be fixed and that you have something to offer, do not let these kind of artificial barriers keep you from engaging. The country needs your voice. Our country needs your leadership. Needs your leadership from whatever community you're from or wherever you live. Do not be afraid to engage.
And I've got some questions here, but just on that point, on that story, one of the things that was so in Ohio, we also saw a lot of districts that just people hadn't run in before, Democrats hadn't run in before, no one had tried, and the amount of work and energy it takes to build movements is so enormous but so powerful. Yeah. And I think we're getting a lot into, like, we think about politics a lot in 2-year cycles, and movements or anything but. And the resources have to continue to be there. So can you talk a bit about the importance of people being engaged outside of normal cycles and the need for these districts to have consistent energy and engagement?
Sure. So I'm assuming I'm in a room full of voters because everybody here is over 18. And I'm assuming that in this room full of voters, everybody's here is registered and has actually gone in and filled out their ballot. When doing so, I suspect that you live in communities that might be like mine where, one, there are vacancies on your ballot, meaning it'll say county clerk and it won't have a person's name there. Has that happened to anybody before? It happens all over this country, that there are vacancies on the ballot and no one has stepped up to run. It's not just a Democrat issue, it's not just a Republican issue, it is a straight up vacancy. That's a problem. That's a problem. And so there's many initiatives to get young people, millennials, Gen Z, folks to run for state and local office because these vacancies are not sustainable. Because what happens when there's a vacancy? What happens is the party bosses generally come in and they handpick a person that gets appointed to that position. Now, why is that problematic? Oftentimes, those people don't have a skill set, they don't have a particular expertise, but they have something that's invaluable to those folks. They have loyalty. And they have loyalty to the party or loyalty to that appointing person, not loyalty and allegiance to the people, right? And so in so many communities, government is dysfunctional because smart, committed, resourceful, community-grounded people don't step up and run. So your question is, why is it important to engage? Because no matter what year we're in 2019 right now, meaning there's not a congressional election generally this year. There's not a presidential election this year. But in most municipalities, there's an election. My town's electing a new mayor. My town's electing a new city council. There's all kinds of races happening in state legislatures this year. And those are so important. Those races are the ones that impact if you own property, what's your property taxes look like? You know, what is your state legislature gonna move this session? Do you care about gun violence? Do you care about, I don't know, what else do they do? A lot. Do you care about anything? Then they are the ones that are able to pass these bills. Public education, if you care about the quality of your public schools, the easiest, most direct way for you to impact your local schools is to be on that school board.
Absolutely.
To be on your state board of education, to make sure that there is a sustained pathway of funding to support those public schools in your community. And that's criminal justice reform. The major way to impact criminal justice reform is through your state. It is not relying on the federal government and the slog that is Congress, right? So all these races are so important, and most people don't even vote in those elections. People don't even run for those positions. And then we're left with a broken system and people who don't share the experiences or recognize the challenges in communities like ours. And it's very difficult. And so, you know, we need to continuously be engaged. I saw the poll that Mr. Travier was reading and that you all filled out, and I don't know, a quarter of the people, something like that, said that they only engage politically maybe once or twice a year. Engage once or twice a year. That is deeply concerning to me. But I appreciate you telling the truth. But it's concerning, and why is that? Because there are decisions being made every single day that impact your ability to make a good living, to support your family, that decide where you might be able to live. That determine the quality of our air, the safety of our water, the integrity of our food supply, whether or not your email and Facebook and Twitter and Snap gets hacked, you know, all these different things. And so often we just opt out, and we can't continue to opt out of that process.
Thank you. I wanted to switch it a bit, switch the conversation over to healthcare. I know you have such an incredible healthcare background, and one of the largest healthcare crises that we have going on right now is gun violence in this country. And recently, right outside your own district, there was a mass shooting where 4 out of the 5 individuals were your constituents. And it seems like the country may want some change, but the politics seems so kind of stagnant. And can you talk a bit about how can we change this? How can folks here, how can this new generation of young folks engaged in Congress, what can we do to help actually bring about substantial change?
Yes. So, you know, many of us remember what happened in 2017 with the Las Vegas massacre. Then in early 2018, there was a statistic in that first quarter, every other day there's a mass shooting in the United States. The one that got the most attention was what happened in Parkland, Florida. Shortly after those 17 students died, there was some polling around the country. 97% of the American people supported universal background checks on all gun sales. 97%. It's virtually everybody. And yet, the Republicans in Congress would not call a vote on the floor of the House. to pass that bill. It's not that the bill didn't exist, they wouldn't call a vote because that party didn't believe, or the leaders of that party did not believe with the policy. Many Republicans, you don't get to 97% on any issue if there's not bipartisan support. And so it became a major issue in the campaign. There were moms, there were students, there were families that were energized and activated around this, cry for safe communities and action to prevent gun violence deaths in my community, in the city of Chicago, all around the country. And so 2 weeks ago, at a factory just outside my district, a guy walked into work. He knew he was going to be terminated that day. Walked in with the HR person and an intern. Got the news he was being terminated, pulled out a gun, and killed 5 people. Wounded probably 6 officers, including the intern died, the HR manager died, and 3 of his other colleagues died. This is the second time a mass shooting has happened in my community. 11 years ago, gunmen came to the campus of Northern Illinois University and killed a bunch of students. So this is not our first time experiencing gun violence in my district, but I'm committed to making sure it's the last time. So how do we do that? Just this past week, for the very first time in a generation, the Congress considered and passed a bill, a universal background check bill. And it passed on Wednesday. I was proud to vote for it. And then on Thursday, we passed a bill that closes the Charleston loophole. Remember that awful shooting at the AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, right? We took some action to prevent things like that from happening again. So what can we do to move this forward? Both of those bills have, unfortunately, no pathway forward in the Senate, none. Why is that? Because we have a Senate Majority Leader who is unwilling to do the right thing, do his job, and to bring this bill to a vote on the floor of the Senate. This is the same individual that enabled the shutdown to continue for 35 days because he was interested in working closely with the president and moving forward the president's agenda, than keeping his body, the United States Senate, a separate but co-equal part of the legislative branch. So we saved healthcare. Y'all remember this. When they were going to take away our health care in 2017, we called, we went to the Congress, we took to the streets, we were very active in expressing our concern about the need for health care that protected pre-existing conditions in this country, and what happened? John McCain, in a critical vote, right, helped the American people save our health care. We need to engage at that level once again. It's not enough to just save healthcare. It's not enough to flip a House of Representatives. We have got to fight for every issue that's important to us. Now, I know I've spoken in very partisan terms, and I recognize in this very diverse room, there are people of all political stripes. And these issues, there are issues that are going to be important to you regardless of what party you sit in. There are issues, even as a Democrat, that I feel like Democrats aren't great on, and that we need to do better. And we have to speak out against that, right? But the key is we cannot take this posture of sitting back. We cannot take a posture and assuming that someone else is going to speak for us, vote for us, or act on our behalf. Because we've seen what happens when we don't engage. We end up in this mess with our president. And so we have to do our part, and we have so many opportunities to do so.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the more awesome parts of what all of the advocacy that we did in 2018 has led to is all of these just fly young women in Congress,
right?
Just doing fly things all the time.
Yes.
Like, looking online and seeing, you tracking down Mitch McConnell. Where's he at? All types of just like really cool, awesome things. And I was wondering we talk about the importance of young folks getting involved, of women getting involved. But for you personally in Congress right now, what have you seen change? What conversations have you seen change that maybe we don't know about that are the result of having folks like you in those spaces?
Well, we have an agenda that puts women first, right? Like on my committee, I'm on education and labor. That committee has jurisdiction over K-12, higher education, labor unions, worker protections, employer-sponsored healthcare. And the first bill that we moved out of our committee was an equal pay bill. Equal pay for equal work. That is a change. We couldn't even get a vote on that type of legislation before. We are considering affordable child care legislation. We are considering raising the minimum wage, right? All of these, on that committee, all of these issues are things that we know impact young people and people of color directly. And so what is the fundamental shift? The agenda is the fundamental shift. That's what happens when you elect different types of representatives. I'm fortunate in that committee to sit next to Jahana Hayes. Jahana is a congresswoman newly elected from Connecticut. She was the 2016 Teacher of the Year under President Obama. She is so fly, as the SOSA says. And she was a teen mom. And she has had this wonderful, varied life experience, and she brings her whole self to this committee, right, and to this role. I bring my experience as a nurse and having worked in communities all around our country after the worst disasters hit, and working with communities to help them recover so they are better than when that disaster struck. We bring our whole selves. Ayanna Pressley from Boston, who is like, just goals, right? And Ayanna has this amazingly rich experience as a city council member, right? And making real change in local government as the first, I think, person of color to serve in that body in the city of Boston. And she comes, and I don't know if y'all saw these hearings this week, but Girlfriend was on it with Michael Cohen, right? And so we are able to speak with these authentic, powerful voices in a chamber that was designed for just rich white landowners. That's who served in the first Congress in the United States. They didn't even fathom a reality where we could be elected to these seats, where we could hold these seats, and we could represent the diverse communities that we do. And yet we're here, and we get 2 years to do the work. And in political terms, 2 years is not a lot of time. But I know what 2 years feels like. I know what 2 years feels like in college. I know what 2 years feels like when you are sick and you want to make it through for 2 more years, and that is a tremendous amount of time to make change. But we can't do it on our own, right? We can sit here and fight all we want, but if we don't have a community of people behind us that have our back, we will be ineffective. And so that's why we are counting on folks like you to be engaged, wherever you live, right? And it's not just to support any of us, right? But it's to be engaged on behalf of your community, to be engaged, to fight for the issues that you know matter.
Absolutely. I had the honor of meeting Congresswoman Pressley when she came down to Georgia for us. One of the things she told our staff was how important it was to get on campaigns, her own experience in campaigns before she decided to run. And I know a lot of folks, when people tell them to get engaged, they're like, how?
Yeah.
What, where? What are the first steps? How do you? How can this happen? So I wanted you to speak a little bit to how folks could potentially even learn what this entire atmosphere is about, like, and how to get involved.
So you all heard my story. I began as an intern. My office has internships. Would love to welcome you for the summer or for a semester. So that's one avenue. Our website is underwood.house.gov, and we have information about how to apply for the internships there. On my unofficial side, right, we are running for re-election, and we need folks to help on our campaign. And you can find out about that online at underwood4congress.com. And then that's just me, right? Every elected official has the equivalent of those two arms, right? An official side and an unofficial side. There's also the presidential races, right? 2020 is looming large, and there are seemingly like 200 people running for president. And each of them need help. And you can get some great experience. If you want to get trained on how to do this important work, There are resources available online. I know the Democratic Party is rolling out a number of training programs. There's outside groups like Arena, who's doing an Arena Academy in Charleston in April. You could go to that. There's many pathways to entry, and I know for a fact that the Republican Party has many opportunities for you to get engaged. I can't tell you exactly what those are, but theirs are more robust than ours. So it probably won't be that hard to find if that's what you're interested in.
Absolutely.
But you have to get involved. And my team is here, they're up front. You guys wanna wave? Okay, that's who you talk to if you wanna come help us.
Yeah. I was in Des Moines, Iowa last week or week before.
Last weekend, yeah.
For the Arena, and walking into rooms and just seeing like folks from every type of background, like working on musicals, like working in finance, working on, as a consultant, just like on the campaign manager track or on the finance director track or on the organizer track or digital track,
communication,
comms, what have you, and what they were learning that we had to just like learn on the job, like how to make a pathway to victory, how to turn out a vote, how to make a field program was so incredible. So absolutely encourage all of you guys to look at ways and opportunities to get involved, because it is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's heinous and a lot of fun.
And more importantly, let's just take a step back, right? Each of you are so smart. You're so accomplished, right? You're gonna have full and impactful careers in your specialty area. But being a citizen and all that's involved with being an engaged citizen cannot be an afterthought. That can't be something you get to when you're 40 or when you're 60, right? Being a citizen is an active verb. It's a noun, but it's also a verb. You have to do something to be a citizen. And I think that we sometimes get lulled into a state of inaction because maybe things are okay in our lives right now. I need everybody to be involved and to do something, whatever that is for you, but not to disconnect and disengage.
I love it. I know that we wanted to make sure we could take questions as well from the audience.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Kiara. I'm a sophomore from Florida. I'm attending Washington University in St. Louis right now. So there's a lot happening in St. Louis. They're doing a Better Together merger, maybe. Trying to combine the county and the city, which has been just a lot. But my question for you today is, knowing that this is a room of very successful and talented people, what I struggle with the most is taking time for myself in all the work that I do, especially when I'm passionate. So my question for you is, one, what is your motivation? And if it is attached to something personal, how are you giving that time and space for yourself to be in a healthy state to keep doing what you're doing?
Yes, thank you. Self-care is important, and not in like the hashtag I'm gonna take a bubble bath kind of way, right? Like that's also important. Going to yoga is critical, but also fundamentally, right? Sleep, eating a meal with a vegetable, washing your hands because folks are gross and the flu is real, right? Things like that. And so I really focus on those kind of fundamental things, because in my line of work right now, I work 7 days a week. I work all day, every day, and I do it happily because I care and I love my job, and I've been given this gift of 2 years to represent my community in this time of tremendous need and uncertainty in our country. We can be beacons of light and energy and good vibes and progress. And so I happily do it. But I think it's important to recognize the early signs of burnout, the early signs of fatigue, so that we can recharge before it gets catastrophic. And that requires a level of self-awareness and discipline. And unfortunately, I think that many of us don't have that rooting and grounding and discipline to check ourselves when we need to. And so I would just say, in roles like this, where accountability is delayed, meaning my role is up for re-election every 2 years, right? And so accountability in the meantime is in the form of maybe somebody coming to me and being disgruntled, or maybe a bad editorial from our local newspaper. But otherwise, it's up to me to move forward on the issues that I know that we're going to be held accountable for. It's up to me to manage my team in a professional way. It's up to me to measure all of those things. And if my judgment is off, if I'm not at my best, no one will perform well. And so I have to be disciplined to take care of myself so I can take care of the team and take care of my community.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for speaking. Super informative, very educational.
Good.
My name is Ella Sutton, and I study film at the University of Southern California.
Cool.
Fight on, Bruins. Fight on. So my question to you is, when you ran for Congress, you obviously ran on a certain number of issues and a certain number of platforms. As a new member of Congress, what are some misconceptions that you thought was going to happen when you got in there that hasn't happened yet? And what are some challenges that you've run into up front that you are still working to overcome?
Thank you for that question. I thought that we were going to immediately tackle healthcare. Healthcare was an issue that was the top issue all across the country in every competitive race. And I was surprised during even orientation, right? We have like these training sessions once we got elected that they didn't even say the words healthcare, much less outline certain policies that were on deck for immediate action. And so we are now, my team and I are trying to figure out what we want to do, because sometimes you have to be the change you seek, right? And so that means we have to introduce the bills and we have to fight for them and push them forward. And so we're doing that work. And that's, you asked about what does change feel like in the Congress. I argue that's what change feels like. Not walking in and being satisfied with what somebody else's agenda looks like. And how it's not a linear process, right? Just because you're the smartest person, just because you have the best idea, the best policy, does not mean that's what's going to ultimately get voted on, right? Because it's still a political process. And so understanding that intersection between the policy and the politics is one that we are navigating real time. And it's hard, but it's fun. And it's meaningful, right? Because this is something that touches everybody. So we have to get it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name's Azana Washington, and I'm a sophomore at Babson College,
Great.
but I'm from Chicago.
Fabulous.
And so when it comes to voting and electing our officials back home, I get that, mail-in ballot. How do we stay informed on the races going on and who's actually running and what their issues are when we're so far removed?
Yes. So there's an app. It's called Ballot Ready, READY. And it has, I think that they have every single, a copy of every single ballot in the country, and it's a resource. So this is not like my campaign can pay for extra space, not like that. It's not like I can change what they write in the summary, not like that. It just aggregates information on the internet and serves it up to you. You put in your address and your zip code, and it's there with links to the websites. I think that that kind of service is incredibly important, because I know you're getting ready to vote again for the April elections. And so, I would take a look at that. BALLOTREADY. I think it's .com, but it's definitely an app.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. My name is Melissa Bellarjo. I'm a senior at Temple University studying journalism. My question for you is, as a new member of Congress, particularly one that is known for being more progressive, what have you learned from more senior members of Congress about balancing being both pragmatic and progressive in terms of establishing and voting on policy?
Well, I've learned a lot of things. I don't know that all of them have been constructive, to be candid with you.
That's fair.
But what I've found is that it's a balance, right? There's many issues that I care about as a 32-year-old Black woman that are not necessarily the same issues that my whole district cares about. They're not necessarily the same issues that the Democratic leadership cares about, and they're not bringing these things up for a vote. And so I've learned that sometimes action is not always in the form of legislation. Sometimes speaking on an issue or signing on to a letter or oversight and accountability in the executive branch, right? That's an equally valuable way to act in accordance with our values, but may not be reflected in that voting record. And so we have to take a multi-pronged approach to this job. And, you know, we have to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Bakari Smith. I'm a senior at Stanford studying international relations and Chinese. At the inception of our country, the only people who could vote were white landowning men.
Yes.
And even to this day, I mean, after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, there was less voter suppression, but to this day, people of color are disproportionately affected by this. My question for you is, what should we know as educated people of color about our rights for voting? So say we're turned away from a polling station, what should we know? What's the best way to confront this issue?
Right. So voting laws do vary by state. And so there are certain requirements for registration, certain ID requirements and the like. We are working on federal legislation to standardize a lot of that and to make it fairer and easier for people who have the constitutional right to vote to vote. But we understand that around the country, there are many challenges to people accessing the ballot box. And for folks that get turned away, generally there are like local resources. There are generally for each election lawyers standing by to come and intervene on your behalf. And so I think the key is to not just walk away defeated. But Asosa, I think you probably have a lot to say about this issue.
Thank you so much for your question. As someone that worked on the Abrams campaign in Georgia and ran what we call a line warming operation on the day of, how do we make sure people across in every single precinct, in every single line, stay in that line for as long as possible, because we were trying to prepare for the worst. Georgia does have the longest election day lines in the country, and black folks were in line for 4 or 5 hours. When you see voter suppression up close, it does not look like a poll tax or a poll question or whatever. What it looks like is, oh, this precinct should have had 30 machines and it has 2. Oh, they forgot to bring all of the cords for any voting machine in this area. Oh, they told all of the college students at these historically black colleges it's the absolute wrong thing to do, and the absolute wrong place to go. And so Stacey Abrams is a voting rights expert and was fundamentally prepared for any type of as much disenfranchisement as possible. Mm-hmm. And so what did that actually look like? That looked like setting up a voting rights director a year and a half before the campaign. That looked like being able to fly in voting rights experts from across the country to put forth 4 lawsuits within 2 days of the election and win 3.5 of them. That looked like setting up a lawsuit that is going to try to reinstate the Voting Rights Act, the civil rights, the Brown v. Boer voting rights type of legislation within a month after the campaign. So I would make sure that all of your states that your parties have set up, because it is something that we are pushing very hard for, but have set up voting rights directors in their state that have a plan. Because at the end of the day, so many campaigns across the country just said on the day of, oh, I guess we lost. And we looked at them like, they didn't have the infrastructure to take their entire field team and turn into a ballot chasing team overnight. Mm-hmm. To go and literally take photos of all of the provisional ballot records across the state to make sure that when the Secretary of State said X number of votes happened, we could say, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong here. No, you're wrong here. And have them pull down their information because they knew it was wrong because we had receipts. Right, so, but that takes planning and that takes time. And that takes making sure that your state is invested in ensuring that every single vote counts. And so one of the things I would do is make sure that is set up in your state. The second thing I would do is make sure you know beforehand what your voter hotline number is. Mm-hmm. And these numbers will be staffed with hundreds of volunteers. And whatever issue you have in early vote, during vote, post vote, you can call this. Almost every state has one, and you'll be able to call them and figure it out. But I can talk about voter suppression literally all day, but that's not.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Devontae. My name is Devontae. I attend Michigan State University, so sorry, but go green. I'm in human resources. And I study human resources, but I had two questions for you. So first, we've talked about it a little bit with healthcare, with, just in general, like a lot of left and right talk, if you know what I mean. So like a lot of people just say like the left or the right, but I think like these issues these things don't get us anywhere. So how do you focus on, or how do you think we should really try and get out of this society and this cycle of minimizing like the maximum and maximizing the minimum?
Okay, so I'm going to rephrase just a second and say maybe make it less partisan and more nonpartisan. Is that fine for you? So the issues that we care about are not partisan issues, right? Healthcare in itself is not a partisan issue. If I'm sick, if I get cancer and my need to go and see my provider, that need is not partisan. The need to be able to afford my medication, if I'm diabetic, to be able to afford my insulin, that is not a partisan issue. It gets partisan when you talk about how to pay for it, how much it costs, and then who pays. That's when it gets partisan. Education, right? It's not a partisan issue to say that kids should be able to learn how to read. It's not partisan to say that kids should be able to do basic math. It's not partisan to say that kids should be safe in their school building. Not partisan. It gets to be partisan when you say, should teachers be armed? Gets to be partisan when you say, should dollars set aside for public education go to private religious schools? Gets to be partisan when you say that only certain types of kids, maybe only straight cis kids, can access restrooms in their school. That's when it gets to be partisan. And so I think that it's up to us to sort of separate those issues. Basic access issues are not partisan. And I don't think that our leaders approach it in that way, but because there's so many issues woven through, where there's fundamental disagreement around civil rights, human rights, and access to basic services that your tax dollars pay for, then it gets to be partisan. And I know that it comes across probably as just bickering and fighting all the time, and that's counterproductive. But there is more widespread agreement on those foundational principles than probably gets acknowledged, but the disagreement is so fundamental that it looks like we're in the United States and the other side is in Great Britain, and there's a whole Atlantic Ocean dividing us, right? And so it's hard to see that common ground when people are stuck on these fundamental things that they care about. So how do we bridge that? Maybe we spend more time talking about the issues that are shared priorities. Maybe we spend some time talking with a friend who has a different point of view.
On Twitter? Should we do it on
I don't encourage you to do it on Twitter. If you all spend any time interacting with my handles, or if you spend any time on hashtag IL14, you will run into the bots, B-O-T-S, bots. And those people are probably on some bot farm in the Ukraine, sent there to divide and be disruptive, right? Social media is not the way to engage in civic conversations only. I would encourage you to have these conversations face to face, because it is important. But don't let the partisanship keep you from engaging.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for about 2 more questions,
Okay,
so I'm sure they'll both be absolutely brilliant. So go right ahead.
That's a lot of pressure. Hi, my name is Ruby Johnson. I study engineering at the University of Michigan.
Go blue. Where's he at? It's fine.
My question is, if you're passionate about a certain issue, say prison reform, but you don't want to go as far as like running for a certain office or something like that, like what's some ways that we can get engaged to make sure like those issues are being talked about by our like congresswomen or even on the local level? And then what are the ways that we need to be holding the people who represent us accountable for actually like taking our views into like consideration?
Yes. So how to get involved. There are many advocacy organizations. They are often looking for volunteers. They're looking for organizers, and they are looking for champions, people who will talk about it and do the work locally. And so there's many different organizations in the criminal justice reform space, many. And you can pick the ones that are most proximal to you, and you can pick the ones that may be most aligned with your views. But there's no shortage of opportunities to engage and you can find out about it online. In terms of accountability, I think that it's really important to make sure that you know that your elected representative has heard from you. A lot of people post online. That's not engaging with your representative, right? Send them a letter, right? Like literally, write with your hands on a piece of paper, them a letter, and put a stamp on it and mail it in. You can type them an email. You can write an op-ed in your local paper, or you can write a letter to the editor. You can request a meeting, because guess what? Your representative is home every month. They might not be home every week, but they're certainly home every month. And if you request a meeting, you can meet with them or their staff and outline your concerns, your point of view, and ask them some questions and develop a rapport, right? Because if you can develop a relationship with your representative, they'll be pretty honest with you about what's possible, about where they stand on the issue, and over time, you'll have an opportunity to influence their thinking. There's been, over the course of my campaign, plenty of issues that I just didn't know anything about. So it's not like I walked in the door and had a fully formed point of view. I've learned so much from the people in my district about the issues that are important to them, that enables me to do my job well. So I would, first of all, recognize that your representative might not know anything about the criminal justice system to know why there's a need for reform. And so I think that perhaps there's an education component that you can take on with your representative and their staff. And then if you find out that they broke their word, then, call them out. And if you're so inclined, file some papers, get some signatures, and run for office yourself.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gabriella Carter, and I'm a freshman at Princeton University, intending to study in either African American studies or sociology with a minor in visual arts. And my question more so pertains to how you internalize continuously being pitted against other women of color. I wanted to know how how these continuous comparisons have kind of forced you to redefine the way that you approach your work to ensure that you're not merely emulating someone else's narrative like that of Shirley Chisholm, because you're always being compared to her.
Okay. Well, if I'm being compared to Ms. Shirley, that means that we're doing something great, I think. But I don't think I'm being compared to Ms. Chisholm. Okay, so here's the real deal. The Congress is like middle school, okay? And so in middle school, you all lived through it. There's your actual relationships and what people say about your actual relationships, right? There's this weird game of telephone where you say something to your friend and it gets misinterpreted by somebody who just overheard it, and then it just starts to spread around the class.
High school weird
Yes,
groups.
yes, it's so juvenile sometimes. But here's what I know for sure. I have real relationships with my colleagues. Real relationships that are grounded in things that we both care about and mutual trust. And that's not for the media to see. It's not for the world to see. It's between me and that person. And when I know that my relationships are good and that I am a friend, right? You have to be a friend to have friends. That's what my mom always told me. And if I know that I'm a friend to that other person, I don't care what the press says, right? And so we have some really high-profile people in our freshman class, very high profile. And I have good working relationships with each of them. I don't need to do an article. I don't need to do, an interview with a reporter so that it ends up in an article to say, me and fill in the blank are best friends. Who cares, right? That's not my strategy. But the press likes to get clicks. What's the easiest way to get clicks? Who here on their Facebook? Well, you guys probably don't even use Facebook. I have to use Facebook because of the campaign. My Facebook thinks that I care a lot about Kylie Jenner's best friend. Wow. And what happened with Chloe's fiance. You all know what I'm talking about. Okay, Facebook thinks I care a lot about that. Why? Because it's at the heart, catty disagreement, miscommunication, and conflict. And that is what these media sites will push forward every day. They don't want to publish articles about friendship and girl power and having each other's back and working together in harmony, right? So relationships are real. They don't have to be accurately reflected back in the press or in the media, but we can still work together for positive change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question.
Good morning.
Hi.
My name is Ahmed Woodson. I am a junior majoring in aerospace engineering at the University of Maryland, College Park. First things first, I want to say you are truly an inspiration.
Thank you.
After that, I would like to ask if you could just describe working with the Obama administration, and then if you see yourself following a similar path and holding a prominent seat in the executive branch.
Okay, thank you. Subtle. Okay, so working in the Obama administration was awesome. It was the honor of, well, I was going to say the honor of my lifetime, but serving in this job is the honor of my lifetime. So it was great. You know, the president is a transformational leader, one of a kind, had a moral compass that always pointed in the right direction, and someone who valued his staff and treated people with dignity and respect. And so it was easy going to work every day knowing that I was on that team.
Okay.
And it was an opportunity that presented itself because of relationships that I built in doing my job every day. But he was one that believed that people like us should be serving in government and that government should be open. And so there were opportunities to come in and to serve, whether it was an intern. I don't know if y'all have met Rayshawn Payton yet.
Yes.
Yes, okay, he's a JRF alum who was a White House intern. And now he's very senior staffer on Capitol Hill. And so they created a pathway into these roles, and I appreciate that. The Trump administration has internship programs. They have entry-level jobs for people who want to serve. And I would encourage you to do that. I believe if your president calls you and asks you to serve, you serve. I don't care who it is, right? There's public service on behalf of the United States of America. Don't do anything unethical, don't do anything that you don't believe in, okay? But there's something really rich about serving our country. And I don't want my comments here today to be misinterpreted that loyalty is to any one political party. It's in service to our country and upholding the Constitution. And so that's something that I learned through my time in the Obama administration. As an intern in his office, we learned that core fundamental value. But there are opportunities all around us. Will I be running for president? That is in no way part of my plan, not at all. And I'm really committed to learning how to do this job really well and representing the people of Northern Illinois to the best of my abilities. And we're 8 weeks in. Feels like an eternity in some ways. 8 weeks. I know, so much has happened. But who knows what's ahead. I think one of you is going to be the president of the United States, and I can't wait to support you on that journey. Thank you.